Welcome to The Coaching Corner, a podcast for coaches coaching in the child welfare field. I'm your host, James Coloma, and on today's episode, we'll be talking about case planning with families. We'll go over the case plan field tool, we'll talk about how to create SMART objectives, and that these documents should be living documents throughout the life of the case. In a moment, Kim Giardina from San Diego County Child Welfare Services will join us on today's episode to help us understand more about this topic. I'm James Coloma, and we'll be right back. Hi, Kim.
Hi, James.
Welcome to our podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
We're glad to have you with us as well. So, before we begin, would you mind telling us just a brief some things about you?
Sure. Currently, I'm a manager in San Diego County in the Policy and Program Support Division. I've been working in the child welfare field for over 14 years and worked most of the areas of child welfare. I've also been a trainer for about 10 years and specifically related to safety organized practice, been training that for almost 5 years now. And I've also been a coach for safety organized practice, so that's an area I'm particularly passionate about.
Today, you're here to talk with us about case planning with families. So what does that mean when we talk about case planning with families?
Well, I think this is something we've been making a shift toward in child welfare is how we do case planning. I think particularly when we introduced the computer system, CWS CMS, it shifted our work a little bit more towards workers sitting down at their desk and just putting a case plan into the computer. And we're trying to change that back a little bit more, that case planning is really a process. It's not just a document that you print out from your computer. And so it's really something where we need to be engaging our families and partnering with them to develop a plan over 6 months of how they're either going to reunify with their child or get their case closed and make sure that they have the tools that they need to safely parent their children.
Okay. And I understand in California we have what's known as the Child Welfare Services Case Management Services. So how does this new thinking around developing different kinds of case plans or upgrading our case plan interface with that system?
Well, we certainly still have to use the CWS CMS database, and I would imagine other jurisdictions have their own SACWIS systems, whatever it is, that contain a case planning tool or document within it. So certainly we want to interface with that system. One of the tools that we've developed to sort of help workers make that crosswalk is a tool called the Case Plan Field Tool. And it actually helps crosswalk the structured decision-making system, the case plan tool within CWS CMS with helping us engage families so that we can talk to families about what are the objectives, what do they really want to learn, and help those align with what's already in the computer system of what we have to document. How does that relate to our safety and risk assessments in terms of the worries that we had about a family, and then connect those to the safety goals. And so we can help families and workers think through those pieces together, and the Case Plan Field Tool sort of helps us do that crosswalk.
So is that case plan field tool then a document that assists the worker in making sure they hit the high points of what they need to document?
Yes, it is. And so it's a booklet that is organized by the structured decision-making safety assessment. And so any sort of safety threats that a worker might identify for a family, be it physical abuse, neglect, whatever the case may be, a worker can go to that particular section of the booklet, see all of the objectives that are in the CWS CMS system that they might pick from that would support learning around that safety threat. And then from there, begin to develop smarter objectives. It has some suggestions for solution-focused questions that workers can ask families to get some of the detail that we need to really make those objectives be that SMART objective, and then provide some suggestions of possible safety actions.
And what is a SMART objective?
So SMART objectives, we talk about being specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, timely. So a lot of people have heard that acronym before, but what it basically means is that we're really clear about exactly what the family needs to do, when they need to do it by, and what it's going to look like when they've been successful. So, we have often left objectives to be quite vague. The father will learn how to address his mental health issues. Well, that's really nice, but what does that really mean? So let's get concrete. Does he need to be going to a therapist and learning some particular skills around managing his depression? How will he show us that he's learned how to manage that depression? Maybe he's going to keep a journal. Maybe he's going to scale himself every week on a scale of 0 to 10. Maybe he has somebody who he talks to when he's feeling particularly low. So we want to get really concrete about that. We also need to make sure that it's realistic for families. In the child welfare system, we're working under very quick time frames, and so we don't want to set families up for failure by giving them things that they certainly couldn't accomplish in 6 months. So we need to make sure it's very realistic. And we also want to bring in that support system. How do we, put in supports around the family to help them accomplish these objectives?
So when we talk about being realistic for the family, what does that look like? Do you guys limit the amount of objectives that are put into the case plan field tool?
Yes, absolutely. And I think this is one thing I see in practice. When I first used to work in the system, I would get cases, and these case plans would have 15 or 20 objectives for these families. And my first reaction was, I could never do this. How could I expect a family to do this? So we're really trying to get workers to think critically. What are the top 3 to 5 objectives that families really need to address to develop safety for their children? Really, there shouldn't be more than 5. If you need more than that, we maybe aren't addressing the most critical issues with a family. And so we really want workers to be able to think through what are the things that are really having an impact on the child that we need to do some teaching and learning around so that we can build safety.
So I noticed that you mentioned about that the objectives should be around safety for children. How does that relate to making sure that the objectives are developed with the family?
Well, I think that's a great question. One of the things that workers need to do is be really clear about what they view as the danger and what they view as sort of the safety goal for this family. But we also need the family's voice in that. And so what do they see as the danger? What contributed to the danger happening in their household? What has maybe worked in the past for them to sort of resolve that danger? We won't know that information if we're not partnering with the family and doing that engagement. So that's why in the case plan field tool we've included the section on solution-focused questions. We need to be digging for what has worked in the past, who has supported them in the past. What do they see their life looking like in 2 years, 4 years, 5 years when their kids are 18? What would they like to build so that we can work towards safety? So without including the family's voice in that, we're really going to be ending up back to sort of the old way we used to function, which is just, I'm going to sit here and tell you all the things maybe you shouldn't do, rather than really working on what are the things you can do and should do to build that safety for your child.
Can you also speak to, or would you also speak to, moving away from services towards behaviorally specific acts of protection over time?
Absolutely. This has been a big shift for us. One of the things we talk about with safety organized practice is that services and safety are not the same thing. So I think most child welfare workers can relate to having families who have attended all their services, and we still don't feel like they've changed to really build safety for their families. And on the other hand, we've had cases where families maybe didn't really go to any of their services, but utilized other supports and really have made some significant changes where we feel like it would be safe for them to go home. There's always going to be a balance, and services are the means to an end. They're the one way that families can learn some of the things they need to learn about their objectives. But they're not the only way. And we know from adult learning theory that not everybody learns the same way. And so we need to understand that when we're working with our families. So when we think about the types of objectives, even if it's an objective around gaining parenting skills, not all parents learn from going to a parenting class. And to be quite honest, the research shows that a general parenting class isn't actually that effective. So we need to be looking at what do we know from the research that's most effective with our families, paired with listening to that family. What do they think is really going to help them learn those parenting skills? And we need to be open to thinking a little bit creatively. Do they think they have, their mom is like the best parent in the whole world and they want to learn from their mom, or they have a friend, or I had a case with a father who had physically abused one of his daughters with a belt, and he had never raised girls, been around girls. His girls were getting to be in that preteen stage with a little attitude, and he didn't know how to handle it. And he asked if he could go to the library and read a parenting book. Every 2 weeks, he was going to pick a new book or a new article geared toward parenting preteens and write a report on it. And it was a very successful way for him to learn skills particular to what was happening in his family at that point in time. And I think we wouldn't have had the same result had we just said, no, we're going to stick with the way we always do things. This does pose a particular challenge for workers in terms of working with the court. Court systems often still want to see services, and so we're not going to completely throw services away, but we also don't need to make families go to a parenting class, therapy, DV, anger management for every family, no matter what the problem is. So we really want to have workers do that solution-focused interviewing with families so that if we are going to send them services, we make sure it's the right services at the right time.
And so this is all laid out then in the case plan field tool. And I imagine that case plan field tool then helps workers to see, here are the objectives, here's how you could change those into a SMART objective, and that to limit it to 3 to 5 objectives for the family and make it realistic for them.
Right, absolutely. And it also helps workers drill down to a piece that I think we often have forgotten, are sort of those intermediary steps before parents reach that long-term objective, and we usually call those safety actions. This is usually where the network really becomes involved with the family, and the network can still be made up of professionals. Over time, we want to move it away from professionals more to natural supports, but this is where we can bring in services, but really connected to concretely how they're going to be helping the family. So, for example, if a parent is going to be going to therapy, one, workers need to be really clear with what are they supposed to accomplish in therapy that is about the safety issues around whatever the impact was to their child. So we need to be clear about that. And then what is the therapist's role in assisting with that? So one of the safety actions might be that, mom will go to talk to her therapist, and she will be able to list 5 concrete steps that she can take when she begins to feel angry or frustrated and like she's going to lash out at her children. And so then she can share those 5 concrete steps with her worker, and it's a way that we know she's working toward the long-term objective of being able to manage sort of her, anger and frustration with whatever the issue was for the family. And so helping workers get to those sort of concrete actions that really help us then measure the family's progress. We really want to help workers have sort of an easier way to determine whether or not families are making progress. And because we want the case plan to be a living document, it makes it a little bit easier. Workers can take it out every month and show families, wow, look, you've done this step. Great, let's talk about it. What did you learn from it? How is it impacting you? How are you using that in visits with your child? Can you demonstrate that for me? And really encouraging parents to demonstrate, not just attend and participate in things.
You'd mentioned that the case plan field tool is something that the workers could take out on a monthly basis to share with their family. So I'd imagine that this is a living document then, and that if in a future visit the family goals may change, that the case plan would also then change.
Absolutely. And that's what we're hoping workers are doing, that every month when they go out to visit that family, they're taking the case plan with them, they're reviewing it, what goals have been met, do we need to modify and change anything, are the services that we initially thought were going to help really helping? If not, do we need to put in new services? how's the network doing? If grandma said she was going to come over and do daycare so mom could go to therapy, is that working? And if not, we need to put in some new supports in there. And so we want to check on the network. And so making sure that families are aware of the progress that they're making. We want to celebrate that progress with families. Oftentimes they just hear all the things they've done wrong. And so encouraging them, showing them, wow, great, look what you brought me. This is fantastic. Look what you talked about. Look what you've already accomplished. And then helping them recognize how that progress directly relates to their ability to keep their child safe. And so, yeah, we definitely want this to be a living document, something that's changeable and moldable, with both the worker and the family having input to those changes.
You spoke a little earlier about the courts and about the buy-in that the courts have had about services, and that you're continuing to include services. How about their buy-in in terms of making the case plan a living case plan?
Well, they certainly are very supportive of the way that we've started to practice. Many attorneys really appreciate the more concrete, clear language that we're including in case plans, the fact that it does have network involvement. We've, in San Diego, had really positive feedback from minors attorney that really makes them feel like the child will be much safer because there is a network of people working around this. And then the fact that we continue to make it a living document, nobody wants to see the same case plan review hearing after review hearing after review hearing. I mean, it feels like, what are we doing here? And so the fact that we are keeping it a living document and that they can see from one hearing to the next documented progress or lack thereof, which makes decisions easier, showing that, okay, hey, we're responding to the needs of the family. Great, they addressed this. Now all we have left is to address this maybe one component. We got the other two taken care of in the first 6 months. Now we only need to do one more, and then we'll be ready to go. So I think we've had good feedback about that. It does pose a little bit, it can, I guess, pose a little bit of a workload issue for staff. If there are really significant changes that need to be made to a case plan, particularly to the services that are ordered by the court. I think different jurisdictions may have different policies, but I know in a lot of jurisdictions, they do have to go back to the court and would get that updated case plan reapproved with new services being ordered for the family. So if that accommodation needs to be made in between a regularly scheduled court hearing, it would be a little bit of an extra workload for a worker. But I think we find that the benefits outweigh the workload piece. We don't want to keep making parents go to services that aren't helpful to them. That only prolongs the case. So I think it's still worthwhile if we do have to go back to court to make that change. In the long run, it'll benefit everybody.
Have you seen the use of the case plan field tool correlated with any better outcomes for families?
Yeah, we have actually done some case review processes to look at the utilization of the case plan field tool and then outcomes for families. And we are seeing that when the tool is used in conjunction with just the good practice around the tool and really utilizing the network, we are seeing families reunify more quickly and being able to sustain that reunification over time so that they're not coming back into the system. And that's what we're hoping for. We're hoping if we can be very clear about what was the danger, what's the safety goal, what are we trying to accomplish, and then the how are we going to get there, that everybody will know and be able to move through it more quickly than if we're really vague and parents don't really know what's expected of them.
That's great to hear. I'm glad to hear that you've done some studies about the case plan field tool and that it's being connected to outcomes.
Yeah, we always want to track those pieces, right? Make sure it's a useful practice for workers and families.
I think it would be helpful for us to see this in action. Would you all be willing, if we schedule some time, to come out there and possibly film a worker utilizing the case plan field tool, whether that's in a mock role play or some other type of a situation?
Yeah, I think that would be fantastic. And I know several workers who use it regularly in their practice and are great at engaging families in getting their input to the case planning process. So that would be fantastic.
Well, that's great. We'll make sure to schedule that. Do you have anything else to add about the Case Plan Field Tool or about case planning with families in general?
I think the only other thing I wanted to highlight is that case plans also include planning for visitation. And so making sure that that comes up in the discussion. It's typically not always the focus of case planning because we think about services for case planning, but at least for California, we have to include the visitation plan in our case plan. And so we want to think about that as well in terms of the solution-focused questioning and types of visitation arrangements that we want to be making. This is another great area to include the network. And it's also how we can connect what the parents are supposed to be learning in their services with actually demonstrating safety. That our visits should still be a time for parents to demonstrate those acts of protection. So it's how you can help line up the case plan and the visitation plan. That maybe one of their safety actions is that during a visit, mom will demonstrate new ways to redirect her child without yelling or getting angry at the child. And so we can see maybe that what she's learning from therapy or parenting, that she's connecting that and actually demonstrating it in a visit. So it helps parents understand how everything that they're working toward is together. It's really meant to be one thing, not a bunch of separate things.
Thank you for highlighting including visitation plans in the case plans as well. Do you have any last words, Kim?
I think my only last words are to really encourage workers to think about case planning as a process. It really shouldn't be just a one-time event that then we turn in this document to the court, but it's a process that we engage in with the families to help them really think about how to build safety for their families.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Kim.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be right back. You've been listening to The Coaching Corner from the Public Child Welfare Training Academy Radio, through the Academy for Professional Excellence at San Diego State University School of Social Work. For more information about the Academy for Professional Excellence and the services we offer, please visit us on the web at theacademy.sdsu.edu. You can also subscribe to the Academy for Professional Excellence's YouTube channel by searching for the Academy SDSU. If you want to let us know how we did on this podcast by giving us 3 to 5 objectives about how we could do better, and by making sure that those objectives are SMART, you can contact us by sending us an email to jcoloma@mail.sdsu.edu, and in the subject line, reference the title of this podcast. A special thank you to our guest today, Kim Giardina. Please join us next time as we explore other topics in the child welfare arena. I'm your host, James Coloma, and now go out there and inspire and innovate our child welfare field.